Well, hi again. This is Do Space After School Kidcoders, and my name is Kafaya. I'm a community learning specialist at Do Space, and I will be facilitating today's Kidcoders session. How are you guys doing? So we have quite a few planned for today, so I'm going to get right on to it. As always, we will be continuing with our lessons on the Kano Code website. We're learning different programming concepts using the Kano Code interface. And 3 weeks ago, we learned about loops. 2 weeks ago, we learned about variables. And last week, we learned about events, which brings us on to what we're learning about today. So for today, we're going to learn about logic. And to be specific, if statements in logic and programming. And just like we did in the previous weeks, we're going to watch a few videos before we, actually just one video, before we get on to completing the challenges that help us practice how to use if statements, logic, on the Kano Coding website. So without further ado, these are the challenges. This is the video that we're watching, and these are the challenges that we are going to complete to just give us a brief introduction and also ensure that we have fun while learning about if statements. So I'm going to go on to the Kano Coding website to get started. So for anyone who wants to join me, I would put the link right here in the chat if I can get to it right now. Give me a second. I'm going to put the link in the chat for anyone that's interested in working on the Kano Code website with me, or if you would just prefer to just observe while I do it and then you can go work on it on your time, that is also perfect. But in order to use the Kano Code website, you need to create an account first. So I don't know how many of you guys have an account, but you're going to need your parents' approval to get on to the website. So I've just put the link to the Kano Code world in the chat, so feel free to click and work along with me, or we can go ahead and just explore. Today's video is quite lengthy, so I'm just letting you guys know ahead of time, just so that, but I promise you it's a lot of fun. So let's all just sit back, relax, and enjoy learning about if statements and logic. Okay, so give me a second. Here we go.
Hey there, welcome back to Kano Club. In this video, we're going to be looking at logic, and more specifically, if statements. An if statement is kind of like putting a question in your code that asks if something's happened or not. And then depending on the answer we get, we can make something happen. Let's say I was making a game. I could make an if statement that asks whether my character has hit an enemy or not. And if it has, then I could do something like increase my score by 1 or detract numbers from the enemy's health. Let's make a creation with an if statement so I can show you how they work. I think for this creation I'm going to make something a little bit weird. I'm thinking about a UFO, like a flying saucer that abducts animals, because apparently that's what they do. I don't know what they're doing with them. Let's start out by adding a sticker part for our UFO. So I'm going to open the parts tab and grab a sticker. And I'm going to go to our sticker tray to change the image. And I'm going to drag out that block and pop it in the when app starts event. I'm going to click on our crocodile. So I'm going to go down all the way to the space section and click on that. And right at the bottom here is a lovely flying saucer sticker. And I think he's a little bit too small. So I'm going to grab a set size block from our sticker tray and drag that in. And currently it's 100% size. I want it to be about 150% of the original size. There we go. I think I'm also going to adjust where the UFO is. Right now it's like dead center in the middle of the canvas. I want it to be up a bit so that there's a bit more room for things going on underneath it. So I'm going to go back to the sticker tray and get a move to block. And drag that in. So that's moved it up to 0, 0. I need it over a little bit. I want it back in the middle. So I'm going to put 400. That's halfway across the canvas. And I'm thinking maybe 150. Yeah, I think that's a good Y position. So what I want to do is make it so that an animal starts at the bottom of the canvas and moves its way up into the UFO, right? So to do that, I'm going to have to use a loop so that I can make something move over time. So let's go into the control tray and grab an every 1 seconds block. And I'm going to change that to every 1 millisecond. So it's running every single millisecond. So it's running really fast. So at the moment, our UFO is kind of in the middle of some kind of white void thing. So I'm going to grab a background color from the draw tray and put him in the sky. I'm going to make it a nice blue sky by changing the background color. There we go. So he's actually in the sky now. So now I'm going to draw the animal that's getting taken up into the UFO. So I'm going to go into the draw tray, but before I draw the stamp of the animal, I've got to grab a move to block. Because remember, you've got to pick where you're going to draw something before you decide what you're drawing. So I'm going to move it into the middle of the canvas so it's underneath the UFO. Remember, the UFO is at an X position of 400. So we're going to move that to 400 as well. Now I'm going to leave the Y for now, and I'll show you why in a minute. So I'm going to open up the draw tray and grab our stamp. Pop it in there. There we go, we have a crocodile. I think I'm going to go a bit more classic. I don't know what it is with aliens always abducting cows, but that's definitely a thing. So I'm going to change it so that we're abducting a cow. Now, if you remember the video I did about variables, you remember that I made a balloon float up through the sky using a variable. So that's what I'm going to do with our cow. I'm going to use a variable to make it move up. So let's open up the variables tray and grab a set variable block. And I'm going to plug that in above our loop. We need to put the variable above our loop because we need to set what it is before we start using it. So I'm going to change the name of our variable because right now it's item, which isn't very descriptive. I'm going to go and create a new variable. And I think I'm going to call it cow height. There we go. I'm going to save that. And I'm going to go back into the variables tray to grab a number block and click it in there. And we're going to set the cow's height so it starts at the bottom of the canvas so it can travel up. So I'm going to change it to 600. And I'm going to then use our variable. So I'm going to drag out variable block and connect it to the Y position of the cow. And I'm going to change that to cow height. There we go. So it's at the bottom of the canvas now at 600 pixels down. So just like we did in the variables video, we're going to make the variable change over time to make the cow move up. So open up the math tray and grab this block here. And we're going to pop this at the bottom of our loop. And if you just change item to cow height, which is the name of our variable, and right now it'll go 600, 601, 602. So it's going down, so it's like fall off the bottom of our canvas. So I'm going to change that to -1. So every millisecond it's going to go 600, 599, 598, 597. It's going to keep going all the way up. And it looks very funny right now. That's because it's a stamp. So it's drawing it every frame. And it kind of makes it this weird splodgy cow effect. So to fix this, we're going to go into the draw tray and grab a clear drawing block. So if we put this clear drawing block at the top of our loop, we'll get a nice clean canvas every frame, and our cow will look like it's moving up rather than looking like it's a tube of toothpaste. So let me just restart the code so we can have a little look at what we've made so far again. So as you can see, we've got a bit of a problem. Our cow is floating up to the UFO, but it just kind of keeps floating into space. Whereas what we really want is for it to kind of disappear into the UFO like it's been abducted. So to fix this, I'm going to use an if statement that brings the cow back down to the bottom of the canvas every time it reaches the UFO. So then it looks like a kind of like an endless stream of cows being abducted into space. So remember, like I said earlier, an if statement is like a way of asking a question to see if something's happened or not in your code. So let's grab an if statement block. Those live in the logic tray. So if we open up logic, there's a whole lot of weird looking blocks in here. We're going to grab the first one. It's kind of like an event block. It's kind of C-shaped, or like a loop block. It's got space inside for code to go in. So I'm going to grab this block and I'm going to put it inside of our loop. The slightly strange thing about if blocks is that they look a little bit short, like they're missing a part. Well, that's because you can plug different blocks into the end of it. We're going to use the most common one that you're going to plug into an if statement that compares two different things. So if we open up the logic tray, and if we get this block here, it's kind of got two gaps and it's got an equal sign in the middle. So I'm going to drag that out and I'm going to connect it to the end of our if statement. So that kind of looks like one full block now, right? So as you can see, this block has like two other little block-shaped gaps for us to plug things into. And that's how we ask our question. So we're going to use this to check if our cow has reached the UFO. And that's the question we're going to ask. So how do we do that? Well, if we go into the variables tray and we grab a variable block and plug it into the first gap. And if we change that to cow height, remember that's the variable we made earlier that's keeping track of whereabouts our cow is on the canvas. So that's our first thing. We need to compare it to a number. So if we open up the math tray and grab a number and plop it into the second gap. So we want to ask if our cow has gotten to a certain height. So we're drawing our UFO at 150 pixels down on the canvas. And we want to check if it's gotten around there. So I'm going to change this number to 200. So what this block here is doing is that every 1 millisecond, it's asking if our variable that's holding how high up on the canvas our cow is has reached 200 yet. And we could do something that responds if the answer to our question is that yes, the cow height variable is at 200. So now we're going to do something really smart with our if statement. We're going to use it to change where the position of the cow is if it hits the UFO. So let's open up the variables tray and get another set variable block. What we're going to do is we're going to open up our cow height variable again and change it. We're going to grab another number block from the variables tray. And we're going to say, when it hits 200, move it back down to the bottom of the canvas. So if I set the cow height variable to 600, when it hits our UFO, it will jump right back down to the bottom again. So let's just quickly go over what's happening with all these variables, because it is a little bit confusing. So to start off, we use our variable, cow height, to set where the cow gets drawn from at the bottom of the canvas at 600 pixels. And then we move and draw it at our variable. Then after we've done that, we take 1 away from the current height, so it keeps moving up the canvas. And then we have our if statement that asks if our variable is equals to 200. Has it gotten up to the UFO? That's what the question's asking. And if it has, we need to change our cow height variable so that it's back down to 600, just like it was at the start. So it moves the cow back down to the earth. I'm going to finish off this creation by adding a few more little bits to make the tractor beam so that it actually is using some of that cool alien tech to abduct the cow. Let's open up the draw tray again. And I'm going to grab another move to block. I'm going to put it in our loop. And I'm going to move... You know what, I'm going to start drawing the beam first, and then we can move it into place. So I'm going to make it a nice green beam. I'm going to change the fill color to green. And I'm going to draw a triangle. There we go. It's a very tiny triangle. You can't even see it. It's only 5 pixels by 5 pixels. So I'm going to change it so that it's about 300 pixels wide and 500 pixels tall. So let's move the X position into the middle of the screen, so it's coming from the center of the UFO. So I'm going to change that to 400, and we're going to move this down. I think if this is at 200, I want it to start around here. I'm thinking 300 or so, maybe a bit more. 350. Okay, perfect. Problem is it's kind of drawing over everything. I think I'm going to add a transparency block. So we're going to make it see-through. So let's get a draw set transparency. And like with a fill color and moving it, you need to put it in your code before you draw your shape, because you need to set it up first. And I'm going to set the transparency to 30. Yeah, that's about right. Now, we've got a couple of problems that we've now made with the cow. The cow, firstly, is a bit too big to be going into our UFO. And secondly, he's very see-through. Because this is in a loop, when it loops back round to the top of the code and we draw the cow again, the transparency is still at 30 for the beam. So let's grab another draw block and another transparency block. I'm going to put that above the cow, and we're going to change that to 100, and there we go. You can see him better now. And I think for my final finishing touch, we're going to make him a little bit smaller. Maybe 60. There we go. One last thing. I'm going to be very cheeky, and I'm going to use our cow height variable and plug it into the rotation of the cow. Look at him go! I kind of want to be that cow. It looks fun. And there you have it. Who knew that if statements could help aliens abduct cows?
Awesome, so that's the end of the video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it as much as I did, because I enjoyed watching it, and that was such a cool thing that she created. So now we're gonna go ahead and try to make magic by ourselves. And to start with, we're starting with the magical if statements challenge, and as always, the instructions are in the top right corner of the page, and I'm just going to work along and follow along just as if it was you working on it by yourself. Okay, so in this creation, you're going to be moving things around on the canvas, so you're going to need a loop. To do that, we're going to open the control tray and drag the block and change it from seconds to milliseconds. And now we're going to add a parts button. So I'm going to go in here to the add parts, and I'm going to select the sticker part. And now I'm going into the sticker tray to make sure to position our sticker. And now I'm going to connect that to the loop, and now the next step is to add another part, which I'm going to do by selecting the add parts button, and I'm going in here to select the mouse, and inside of the mouse tray I'm going to do the X and the Y axis. And that is because for this activity, we're not giving it any directions, but instead we're going to be using our mouse to move around the canvas. Nice. Very cool. So let's move on. Next, we're going to go into our logic block to select our if statement. So as you remember from the video, she selected the first block and then she connected the next block to make it a complete if statement. So if statements, just like she mentioned in the video, are used to compare two things to see if they are the same or different from each other. Now we're going to go into our mouse tray and select our mouse X block, and inside of our math tray, we're going to select 0. So if mouse X equals 400 or is greater than 400, we want to make sure that we get a horse. Nice. So I'm going into my draw tray to select a background color for this, and I'm going to change my color to a kind of blue or grayish blue. So now to test it out, we're going to move our mouse to the right of the canvas to see if our crocodile is going to transform into a horse. So let's see. This is my mouse on the right side of my screen. And now I transformed my crocodile into a horse, just like we stated in our blocks of code right here. So next, I'm going to see that the area in my if statement, I'm going to transform, since we already set the mouse X area, we're going to do the same thing so that we switch from a horse to a unicorn. So to do that, I'm going back into the draw tray, and first I'm going to set a background color. Excuse me a second. I'm back. So we're going to set our background color to something more colorful. So let me do pink. And I'm going to go in here and select my sticker image, and this is what lets me choose my unicorn. Awesome. And now I'm going back into my draw tray, and I'm going to tell my unicorn to draw, and back into my my draw tray, I'm going to choose a fill color. For this part, I'm going to add some confetti, so that is what I'm doing now. So now I'm going to choose a random color for my confetti, and inside, for the confetti effect, I'm going to go into my draw tray to try to draw a circle, and as you can see, we have some confetti. And if I move to the other end of the page, you see that even though my background changes, I still have my horse. So let's go in there and try to change that. So I'm going into my math tray and I'm going to select the random number block. So that way my confetti has different sizes for my circle, and it's not just the same shape or the same size of my circle that's showing over and over again. So can you see? Now we know that when it switches from horse to unicorn, depending on where my mouse is on the canvas, my background changes. But I want to make sure that when it switches back to my horse, that there's no confetti. So to do that, we're going to go into our draw tray and we're going to use the clear drawing block. And that way, we have it all right now. So if I make that bigger, you see, when my mouse is around the right corner of my canvas, I get my horse in a plain background. And when I move over to the left side, I get my unicorn with a lot of confetti. See? It's awesome. So let's go on to the next challenge and see what we have. So the next challenge is a challenge that lets you quiz your friends. So it's exciting because once you're done building this game, you can go ahead and share it with your friends and make them guess what your favorite animal is. So let's get started with that one. So test your friends by asking them a question about you. It could be any question, but for this challenge, we're going to ask what your favorite animal is. So the first thing to do is to add parts by using the add parts button. Add a text by using the add parts button. So I'm going into my text tray and I'm going to select a position for my text. So for my X value, I want it to be 400 so that it's as well centered on the page. And for my Y position, I'm going to choose 200, just like the instruction says. Next, I'm going back into my text tray and I'm going to select the text value. And inside here, I'm going to write, what is my favorite animal? I'm going to ask the question. Okay, and now that we're done typing in our question, we're going to go next. And now we're adding a sticker part using the add parts button. So I'm here going to add the sticker. And inside of my sticker tray, I'm going to select the position that I want my sticker to be. And my X position is going to be 400, which is like the center. And my Y position is going to go right below my X position. And that is going to be 450. It's right. So, and next I'm going to go ahead and change my sticker image to a thought. So it's like thinking, what is my question? Next, I'm going to add one more part, and that part is where, when my friends guess, this is where they're going to add whatever guess they have right here. So text input. So just to be sure that this works, you can try clicking in it and just type in anything. Hello. So we're sure that the text input works. So next, we're going to give the if statement, right? So you're going to use this if block to check whether the answer that your friends write, the answer that's typed in the text input tray, is correct. So I'm going back into my text input tray and I'm going to select the block that says text input value. And inside of my variables, I'm going to select the block that helps me write some text. So I'm going to put cat inside, just assuming that a cat is my favorite animal. And next, I'm going to go back. The text input block stores whatever has been typed in the text box on my canvas. If the statement then checks if the same, it'll check if it matches the text that is input. So next, I'm going to go back into my text tray and select the text value to make sure it matches my cat. And whenever they enter the right answer, I'm going to tell them correct. Awesome. Remember to hit next when you're done typing. Next. So the next thing we're going to do is to make the sticker change to my favorite animal. So for that, I'm going to go in here and choose a cat, just because it's a cat that's right here. If I had an elephant or a dog inside of this comment right here, I would want to make sure that my sticker image matches my choice of favorite animal or favorite item, or whatever the answer to my question is. So now I'm going back into my draw tray and I'm going to set a background color for whenever my friend answers the question correctly. So now let's try this out. What is my favorite animal? Let's do dog. That's wrong. But if I do cat, it's correct. So it gives me the correct screen and then the image of the cat shows. Let's try it again. What's my favorite animal? Cats. That is correct. Awesome. So now we're going to go on to our next challenge. And our next challenge, I think, is the last challenge in this logic lesson for today. So let's see how it goes. So this challenge is titled Glitching Grids, and we're going to use if blocks to create a glitching screen effect. So first you need to set up some variables that you'll put to use later. To do that, we're going to open our variables tray and we're going to set our x value to 0. And we're going to go back and do the same thing to set our y value to 0 also. Variables are set now, and now we're going to add a loop. And to do that, we're going to open our control tray. And so every 1 millisecond, or every 100 millisecond, we're going to get a random color every time. So we're going to change the black to a random color. And now we're going to set the position of where we're going to start drawing. And to do that, we're going to open our draw tray and then set our x and y position. And I'm going to go into my variables tray and set my x position to x and my y position to y. Okay. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a square, and to do that we're going to open our draw tray and then draw a square with the size of 100. Awesome. And as you can see, we have a glitching square right here at the top left corner. So next we're going to go into our math tray and we're going to select this block right here and connect it to the rest of our code. And we're going to change this from item to X. And we're going to change 1 to 100. Awesome. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use an if block to stop the squares from running off the end of our canvas. So I'm going to open my logic tray and of course select my block for my if statement. And now I'm going into my variables tray to select my x and set it to 800. Okay. So when the if statement is triggered, it'll reset the x position to 0 so it starts on the left again. I'm going to open my variables tray and I'm going to set my x position to 0 just like the instruction says. Awesome. So by setting the x variable back to 0, our blocks are going to start drawing from the left every time. And as you can see, it creates a motion of the glitch going from left to right every time. Awesome. So I'm going to go back into my math tray and I'm going to select And now it's time for my Y tray, which I'm going to change to 100. Nice. So that way it goes from top to bottom. Cool. We're going to add another bit of logic to start the squares at the top again when they reach the bottom. So the same concept we applied to the code to make it move from left to right and start again from left to right, we're going to apply the same logic to make it start from top to bottom. So I'm going into my logic tray and selecting my if statement, my if block. And now I'm going into my variables tray. Oops. I'm going into my variables tray, and now I'm going to select Y and set my Y to 600. So when my Y is equal to 600, I want it to set, once that is triggered, I want it to go back to 0 and then start over. Okay. And now, because that moves too fast, we're going to slow it down a little bit by changing this 100 milliseconds at the top of our loop. We're just going to make our loop run every 1 second. So now, just to add some pizzazz to our glitching squares, we're going to add a speaker part, just so we have some sound. And now I'm going into my speaker tray and I'm going to make my speaker play a sound. And next I'm going to add some volume. And now I'm going to make it be random from 50 to 200. Awesome. So there we have it. We have our glitching grits. And of course, if I if I increase my volume, we can hear the music almost as it flows with the glitching squares. So that was fun. I hope that you guys enjoyed watching me do it. Awesome. So I figured we were going to get through our challenge a bit faster. So what I have planned for us today is we're going to hatch our pet, and then if we have enough time, we're going to go ahead and feed that pet. So the first thing to do is to go in here. It's the virtual pet stimulator activity, and so we're going to start from the first one right here that helps us create a virtual pet by hatching it first. So it's like a guessing game to see what pet you're going to get. So let's get started. So to do that, we're going to go into our variables tray and we're going to set our item to egg, because we're going to hatch the egg to see what animal is going to be our pet. So next, we're going to go into our logic tray, and then we're going to select true. And next, we're going into our variables tray, and we're going to set our egg, our pet, my bad. And now we're going to go into our draw tray and select a random pet, right? Okay. To animals. Awesome. And now we're going back into our control tray and we're going to go get our loop. So every one second, every one frame, we want to clear the drawing and make sure to set our background color to green. Yeah. And next we're going to choose a position and set the X position to 400. And our Y position is going to be 300. Next, I'm going to choose a stamp. And in my variables tray, I'm going to select a pet with the size of 150. Ooh, and no rotation. Next, we're going to use our if statements to set our, so if our egg is true, if it's an egg, we want to make sure that we get our okay, so I'm just trying to get the egg that we are going to hatch to give us our pet, right? So now we have created the egg. So ignore all the animals that you saw earlier. This is what we wanted. We wanted the egg so we can play the game that lets us choose our pets. So now we're going to try to hatch our eggs. And I'm adding the speaker to help give us some sound. And we're going to give it an effect that sounds like a snap. So when you snap your egg. Okay, so let's see how that works. Give me a second. I need to turn on my sound. Oops. Okay. So now every time I refresh, you hear the snap and you get a new pet. Again, now you get a fish. Now you get a worm. Next, I don't know what this is. Is this a goat? A sheep? Now you get a pig. So it's fun. Every time you refresh, you get a new pet. I want an elephant. Yes, and now you have a camel. And now you have a snail. Now another piggy. Oops. And yeah, there we have it. And that is all that I have for you today. But since we didn't get to feed our pets today, let's just decide that we're going to do that in our next lesson. Okay? So we have sadly come to the end of our time together today, but I'll be here next week. I hope that you guys come back. If you have any questions, please send us an email at hello@juicespace.org. My name is Kafaya, and I hope to see you guys next time. Have a good day. Bye.